I began from a poor immigrant with only $2,000 to financial independence. Long-time lurker, worked up enough courage to share my story. I'm a first-generation immigrant, and my family came to America with just $2,000 to our name. My parents did their best to shield me from our financial struggles, but I couldn't help but overhear their worries about not being able to pay the rent on our $500 per month moldy apartment. It was a constant source of anxiety for me. The mold came back no matter how many times we painted the walls. I also vividly remember freaking out about the slimy snails under the AC. To make matters worse, we were a poor minority within another poor minority community. Throughout my early years, I faced a constant onslaught of racism and bullying, which left me begging my parents to return to our home country. I'm not entirely sure how I persevered, but I did. My parents worked multiple strenuous manual labor jobs to support us, and I excelled in school, which made them happy and also kept me going. However, high school was a turning point, and I fell into a deep depression. My social development had been severely hindered by my childhood experiences, and on top of that, I was struggling with my weight. I stopped attending school and it all seemed pointless. I attempted suicide, which led to the police finding my car in a ditch, with me in a delirious state. They rushed me to the hospital and pumped my stomach, which was full of drugs, thus saving my life. It took 2 long years, but I eventually clawed myself out and graduated high school. I managed to score well on my SAT and was admitted to a state university. My parents couldn't provide financial assistance for my college education, so I had to navigate the entire process, including submitting the financial aid forms, as they didn't speak English and were always working. I worked part-time to put myself through school. I was paid $40,000 at my first gig, which felt like a fortune. I lived with my parents and worked diligently for the first 2 years. Then I jumped on the real estate bandwagon and poured all my savings into becoming a homeowner. Then came the 2008 housing crash. I found myself owing more on the house than it was worth, and many around me were simply abandoning their properties. These were tough times, but I stayed committed, and eventually, the market rebounded. But my lingering depression never truly disappeared. With access to money, I fell into a cycle of drug and alcohol addiction, squandering a significant amount of money in my 20s. At one point, I was $30,000 in credit card debt and had to borrow money from my family to cover my mortgage. Marriage and fatherhood became my saving grace. In my early 30s, I tied the knot and welcomed my first child into the world. I put a halt to my reckless spending, focused on my career, and began the journey to financial stability. I started my career at $40,000, and by the time I hit 35, I was earning $120,000 annually. That year was punctuated by 2 pivotal events: the birth of another child and the loss of my father to cancer. I persevered. I paid off all my credit card debt, maxed out my 401k, dived into learning about investments and real estate, and acquired another property. I handled all the repairs myself and found myself generating around $1,500 in positive cash flow. My career continued to advance, and by the time I turned 40, I was earning $170,000 per year. My 2 properties appreciated in value, rental income flowed in, and my investments performed well. After totaling our assets, we realized our net worth had crossed the $1 million mark. My partner and I chuckled about being millionaires on paper, but deep down, we didn't quite feel like it. At this point, burnout was starting to set in. I wanted to own my destiny. I decided to start a business to generate passive income. Although it generated some passive income, it was not enough to quit the rat race. This is about the time I discovered the FIRE community. I had a new mission. I concentrated all my efforts on maximizing my income. I targeted high-paying companies and dedicated 6 months to studying and preparing for interviews. It paid off and I was able to land a job paying $400,000 per year. But it was short-lived. A few months later, I was laid off. Income $0. Back to square one. I didn't give up though. After a lot of networking and interviews, I landed a job paying $500,000 per year. The job was and still is extremely stressful, but the prospect of FIRE kept me pushing forward. Today, at 45, my net worth stands at $2.5 million. I was amazed to see it grow from $1 million to $2.5 million in just 5 years. While I might not be able to retire early yet, I believe that by the time I turn 50, the RE part of FIRE will be within reach. It's been a long and challenging journey, from being a poor immigrant subjected to relentless bullying to reaching this point. My mental health is still a work in progress, but I'm making strides. At 45, I'm in the best shape of my life, and meditation has become a great tool to help manage my mental health. I'm not out of the woods yet. I have some health issues and work is still kicking my butt, but I can say that I feel like I own my destiny a lot more than before. Also, let me share my path to being a manager. First, I never wanted to be a manager. I became an engineer because I did not like dealing with people. I've always felt that my social development was stunted due to my childhood experiences. I did not have many friends growing up. I chose computer science because I thought I would not have to interact with too many people. Never did I imagine that I would be here now leading a group of engineers and be expected to generally have the best social skills on the team. Major imposter syndrome. One big paradigm shift I had to will myself into making for my own sanity and survival was to fully accept my role as a people leader. For too long, it felt like I had one foot in the IC world and another in the management world. I've been in management for almost a decade now, but it still remains a daily struggle. I attribute my entry into management to the Peter Principle. I performed extremely well at a former company, and I was made an offer to manage a team. I said yes, without knowing what it entails. The first 2 to 3 years were tough. That's my personal story, but I have also shepherded several ICs, individual contributors, to management. At tech companies, engineers are expected to rise from a junior engineer to at least a senior engineer, or else they are at risk of being fired. So a senior engineer is considered a terminal level. At that point, they have a decision to make: do I stay as an IC and continue coding, or do I want to be a people leader and explore management? I had no idea what managers do before I became one. However, many tech companies have management training for ICs to let them experience what it's like being a manager, because it is a completely different role. After they go through the training, I'd say more than half of ICs decide that it's not for them.